So, Governor, and then Mr. Speaker, Senator Santorum passionately makes the case. It also is a time, as all of you know, of very tough budget decisions the next president's going to have to make, setting priorities. How do you do it? What specifically do you do to help the veterans?
Well, let's distinguish between what gets done at the federal level and what gets done at the state level. In our state, we found a way to help our veterans by saying, look, if you're going to come back, particularly if you're in the National Guard, we'll pay for your education, college degree, both the fees and tuition. We give you a full ride. And we also had a plan that said if you come back and you've been out of work for a year or more, we're going to put like a bonus on your back, which if anyone hires you, that bonus goes to them to pay for your training. So we can encourage that to occur, but let's do it at the state level. Let's not have the federal government continue to extend its tentacles into everything that goes on in this country. Let's take the money that we use to help people who have real needs, and instead of having it all administered by the federal government that thinks they know how to do everything, let's take that money, bundle up South Carolina's fair share and every other state's fair share, send it to them and say, you care for your people in the way you feel best. Let's do that at the state level. And I agree with what Senator Santorum said with regards to our military budget. Right now, for the president to be cutting $350,000 from our military budget, planning to cut another $650 billion, $350 billion, another $650 billion, $1 trillion. His Secretary of Defense says that represents a doomsday scenario. We've got an aging Navy. We've got an aging Air Force. They're planning on cutting our number of active duty personnel. They can't possibly keep up with the needs of our veterans. It is absolutely wrong to balance our budget on the backs of our military. We need a strong military, so strong no one in the world would ever think of testing it.
Mr. Speaker, please come in. We'll have some conversations about Commander-in-Chief. You have the floor now, specifically veterans who need jobs.
Let me just say two things about Congressman Paul's history. The U.S. government did two dramatic things after World War II. They created a GI Bill, which enabled literally millions of returning veterans to go to college for the very first time. My father, who was in the Second World War, went to college on a GI Bill. So there was an enormous expansion of opportunity that enabled them to integrate into a new emerging society. The second thing they did is they dramatically cut taxes. And the economy took off and grew dramatically, and it absorbed the workforce. So I would say we ought to both have a transition process for veterans to enable them to have a real advantage of getting a job when they come home, and we ought to have a very aggressive economic program of regulatory cuts and tax cuts in American energy so that the entire population is absorbed by getting back to about 4% unemployment, in which case virtually every veteran would have a very good job at the end of the transition period.
Let's turn to our audience now. Let's turn now and take a question from down in our audience tonight. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Sonny Cohn. I'm from Sevier County, Tennessee. My question to any of the candidates is, do any of you sincerely believe that Obamacare can either be repealed or reversed in its entirety?
Sure.
Let me go first to Governor Romney on that one. Governor, you have said you would do it on day one with an executive order that would free the states up to opt out, waivers essentially, to get out of that program. I know your friend, the South Carolina governor, might like to have that option. Help me understand as you do that, how would it play out? And what happens to someone with a pre-existing condition, for example, who now has coverage under the president's health care plan, or a young American, 22, 23, 24, who, because of the changes in the law, can now stay a few extra years on their parents' health care? What happens to them when you sign that executive order?
Well, first of all, the executive order is a beginning process. It's one thing, but it doesn't completely eliminate Obamacare. It's one thing I want to get done to make sure that states can take action to pull out of Obamacare. But number two, we have to go after a complete repeal. And that's going to have to happen. That's going to have to happen with a House and a Senate, hopefully that are Republican. If we don't have a Republican majority, I think we're going to be able to convince some Democrats that when the American people stand up loud and clear and say, we do not want Obamacare, we do not want the higher taxes, we do not want a $500 billion cut in Medicare to pay for Obamacare, I think you're going to see the American people stand with our president and say, let's get rid of Obamacare. But we'll replace it. And I've laid out what I'll replace it with. First, it's a bill that does care for people that have pre-existing conditions. If they've got a pre-existing condition and they've been previously insured, they won't be denied insurance going forward. Secondly, I'll allow people to own their own insurance rather than just be able to get it from their employer. I want people to be able to take their insurance with them if they go from job to job. So we'll make it work in the way that's designed to have health care act like a market, a consumer market, as opposed to have it run like Amtrak and the post office. That's what's at risk, at stake here. We go back to this. Ours is the party of free enterprise, freedom, markets, consumer choice. Theirs is the party of government knowledge, government domination, where Barack Obama believes that he knows better for the American people what's best for them. He's wrong. We're right. That's what we're going to win.
So, Mr. Speaker, you heard the skepticism. This is a Southern Republican voter, but he's skeptical. He knows how Washington works. He's watched Washington work. He's asked, can it be reversed in its entirety? You were the Speaker of the House. You understand how this works. How can it be repealed in this current political environment?
Well, let me say, first of all, if you've watched Washington and you're not skeptical, you haven't learned anything. I mean, this system is a total mess right now. Second, can you get it repealed in total? Sure. You have to elect a House, a Senate, and a President committed to that. It has to be a major part of the fall campaign. And I think that, frankly, on our side, with any of us, it's going to be a major part of the fall campaign. The American people are frightened of bureaucratic, centralized medicine. They deeply distrust Washington, and the pressure will be to repeal it. And a lot of what Governor Romney has said, I think, is actually pretty good, sound stuff for part of the replacement. I would always repeal all of it because I so deeply distrust the congressional staffs that I would not want them to be able to pick and choose which things they kept. But let me make one observation. You raised a good example. Why is President Obama for young people being allowed to stay on their parents' insurance until 26? Because he can't get any jobs for them to go out and buy their own insurance. I have an offer to the parents of America. Elect us, and your kids will be able to move out because they'll have work.
One second. Senator Santorum, you heard Governor Romney and you heard Speaker Gingrich. Do you trust them if one of them is the Republican Party's nominee and potentially the next president of the United States to repeal this law?
The biggest thing we have to do is elect a president. I think Newt's right. The problem is that two of the people up here would be very difficult to elect on, I think, the most important issue that this country is dealing with right now, which is the robbing of our freedom because of Obamacare. Governor Romney tells a very nice story about what his plan is now. It wasn't his plan when he was in a position to do a plan. When he was governor of Massachusetts, he put forth Romneycare, which was not a bottom-up free market system. It was a government-run healthcare system that was the basis of Obamacare, and it has been an abject failure, and he has stood by it. He stood by the fact that it's $8 billion more expensive than under the current law. He stood by the fact that Massachusetts has the highest health insurance premiums of any state in the country. It is 27% more expensive than the average state in the country. Doctors, if you're in the Massachusetts healthcare system, over 50% of the doctors now are not seeing new patients. Primary care doctors are not seeing new patients. Those who do get to see a patient are waiting 44 days on average for the care. It is an abject disaster. He's standing by it, and he's going to have to run against a president. He's going to have to run against a president who's going to say, well, look at what you did for Massachusetts, and you're the one criticizing me for what I've done. I used your model for it. And then we have Speaker Gingrich, who has been for an individual mandate, not back when the time that just was heritage was floating around in the 90s, but as late as comments since 2008, just a few years ago. He stood up and said that either should have an individual mandate or post a $150,000 bond. How many $150,000 bondholders do we have here who can post a bond for their health insurance? These are two folks who don't present the clear contrast that I do, who was the author of Health Savings Accounts, which is the primary basis of every single conservative reform of health care. I was the author of it back in 1991 and 92, 20 years ago. I've been fighting for health reform, private sector, bottom up, the way America works best for 20 years. Well, these two guys were playing footsies with the left.
I want to bring Congressman Paul. I'll bring you into the discussion in just a moment, but Senator Santorum directly challenged the governor and then the speaker. Governor, you first.
Well, so much of what the senator said was wrong. Let me mention a few other things. First of all, the system in my state is not a government-run system. 92% of the people had their own insurance before the system was put in place, and nothing changed for them. They still have the same private insurance. And the 8% of the uninsured, they bought private insurance, not government insurance. And the people in the state still favor the plan 3-to-1. And it certainly doesn't work perfectly. Massachusetts, by the way, had the highest insurance costs before the plan was put in place and after. But fortunately, the rate of growth has slowed down a little less than the overall nation. And one of the things I was proud of is that individuals who wanted to buy their own insurance saw their rates, and when they were not part of a big group, saw their rates drop by some 40% with our plan. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But I do believe that having been there, having been on the front lines, showing that I have compassion for people that don't have insurance, but that the Obama plan is a 2,700-page, massive tax increase, Medicare-cutting monster. I know how to cut it. I'll eliminate it. I will repeal it, and I'll return the power to the states, where the power for caring for the uninsured ought to reside constitutionally. Thank you.
Senator Santorum, he says your facts are wrong.
Well, they're simply not wrong. The fact is that, yes, you're right, Governor Romney, 92% of people did have health insurance in Massachusetts. But that wasn't private sector health insurance. A lot of those people were, as you know, on Medicare and Medicaid, so they're already on government insurance, and you just expanded. In fact, over half the people that came on the roll since you put Romney-Care into effect are fully subsidized by the state of Massachusetts, and a lot of those are on the Medicaid program. So the idea that you have created this marketplace and with this government-run healthcare system where you have very prescriptive programs about reimbursements rates, you have very prescriptive programs, just like what President Obama is trying to put in place here. You're arguing for a plan. You're defending a plan that is top-down. It is not a free market healthcare system. It is not bottom-up. It is prescriptive in government. It was the basis for Obamacare, and you do not draw a distinction that's going to be effective for us just because it was the state level, not the federal level.
If you want, Governor, quickly.
Sure, absolutely. First of all, as you probably know, Medicaid is not a state program.
Of course it is. It's a state and federal program.
Medicaid is as demanded by the federal government, and it's a mandate. It's a mandate by the federal government, and it's shared 50-50, state and federal. The people of Massachusetts who are on Medicaid, I would like to end that program at the federal level, take the Medicaid dollars and return them to the states, and allow states to craft their own plans. That would make the plan we had in Massachusetts a heck of a lot better. My view is get the federal government out of Medicaid, get it out of health care, return it to the states, and if you want to go be governor of Massachusetts, fine. But I want to be president and let states take responsibility for their own plans.
Mr. Speaker, it may seem like a while ago, Mr. Speaker, but Senator Santorum made the point, in his view, you don't have credibility on this.
No, what he said, which I found mildly amazing, was that he thought I would have a hard time debating Barack Obama over health care. Now, in fact, as Republican whip, I led the charge against Hillary Care in the House. As Speaker of the House, I helped preside over the conference which wrote into law his idea on health savings accounts, so I was delighted to help him get it to be a law. And the fact is, I helped found the Center for Health Transformation. I wrote a book called Saving Lives and Saving Money in 2002. You can go to healthtransformation.net, and you'll see hundreds of ideas, none of which resemble Barack Obama's program. So I'd be quite happy to have a 3-hour Lincoln Douglas-style debate with Barack Obama. I'd let him use a teleprompter. I'll just rely on knowledge. We'll do fine.
Senator, I want to bring Congressman Paul in. You're shaking your head. Quickly.
The core of Obamacare is an individual mandate. It is what is being litigated in the Supreme Court right now. It is government top-down telling every business and every American what kind of health care that you will have. That is the problem with Obamacare at the core of it, and the Speaker supported it repeatedly for a 10-year period. So when he goes and says, I can run rings around President Obama in a Lincoln Douglas debate, you can't run rings around the fact, Newt, that you supported the primary core basis of what President Obama has put in place.
Look, just one
quickly,
brief
Mr. Speaker. Congressman's getting lonely down here. Let's go.
Just one brief comment. Of course you can. I can say, you know, I was wrong and I figured it out. You were wrong and you didn't.
You held that, Newt, you held that position for over 10 years. And you know, it's not going to be the most attractive thing to go out there and say, you know, it took me 10 or 12 years to figure out I was wrong, when guys like Rick Santorum knew it was wrong from the beginning.
Yeah. Congressman Paul, you have the floor. Do you trust these men to repeal Obamacare?
Thank you. I thought maybe you were prejudiced against doctors and a doctor that practiced medicine in the military or something.